Let's get to the Vav.
Sure.
So how do we know that? I mean, it's an axiom of biblical Hebrew linguistics, let's say mainstream biblical Hebrew linguistics, that the original pronunciation of Vav was, and I'm going to use your term here, and let's see if I can get it right. I made myself a little cheat.
Sure.
It was a labial-velar approximant. Maybe it was wa,
Yeah.
like water in English, or maybe not exactly, but something like that. So how do we know that?
Well,
Do we know that?
so one thing, there'd be two ways at getting at this question. One is what I already mentioned about the transcriptions, right? And you look at how things are transcribed and try to reconstruct based on that. The other would be cognate evidence, right? So I'll answer first from the cognate evidence.
Tell us what cognate means.
Oh yeah, so cognate is where you have languages that are related. If a word might sound the same in multiple languages or similar enough where you can kind of assume there's some sort of relationship, right? So like if you think of like Greek and Latin, for example, have many shared words, English, French, and German, all sorts of things like that. So when you look at the Semitic languages, right, so Hebrew, Aramaic, Arabic, Akkadian, things like that, there is no V reconstructed for Proto-Semitic, right? All the languages that we can trace would attest to, at least at their earlier stages, having
What is Proto-Semitic?
Right, so Proto-Semitic would be like the kind of grandfather or grandmother of all the Semitic languages, right? And in linguistics, historical linguistics, it's kind of it's not. Everyone who does this is aware that it's not going to work perfectly like this. But a proto-language is something that you hypothesize as sort of the parent language from which all the daughter languages come. And so, at least theoretically, you should be able to see what happened, see what the proto-language was like, and map out changes to explain how all the other languages have their different sounds or words or things like that.
So in our, in English, we have Proto-Germanic, right? So both English and German go back, and Dutch, all those go back to Proto-Germanic, but then Proto-Germanic goes back to Proto-Indo-European, right? So that's the kind of thing you're talking about, right?
So things like that, where you have, eventually a proto-language, and you can have kind of proto-languages for each sub-branch of it, right? So you can have Proto-Semitic, and then from that, you would have kind of two main branches where you'd have Akkadian on one side and kind of the other things like Arabic, Amharic, Aramaic, Ugaritic on the other side. But even within those, then you could talk about Proto-Arabic, right? And then beneath that are all the Arabic dialects. And you could have Proto-Hebrew, and within that are the Hebrew traditions like Samaritan. And
so you're saying when we look at all of the Semitic languages, the assumption is when you go back far enough, there's a wa, not a va.
Right. So like if you look at Arabic has a wa, right? If you look at Akkadian, the evidence is that it was a wa, even though that's kind of fallen out even at our...
Wait, tell me that. I don't know that story. It's fallen out in Akkadian
so like
studies?
In Akkadian...
it's dropped the wa.
Yeah, like the wa is it's something that is not always present where you might expect it historically, right? It hasn't dropped out entirely, right? You still have it in words, but it's like, for example, like the conjunction. Because I was thinking of the conjunction wa, like in Arabic you have wa, whereas in Akkadian that's just u.
So in other words, wa means and.
Yes.
In Akkadian, the word for and is u.
One of the words for and is u. But you do get in other places, right? Like you have wardum, or like washba'aku means like I live here, I reside here. So you do have wa in Akkadian. But I was thinking of the conjunction vav, which is why I said that, because the parallel to vav ve.
So in other cases it hasn't fallen out. It's still
in other cases you still have it.
In Akkadian, how do we know how to, and we're not going to go down this path, but how confident are we in how to pronounce Akkadian? Meaning, how do we know how to, don't we know how to pronounce Akkadian because they basically have their version of the Rosetta Stone, what is it, the Behistun inscription, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that.
Well,
and so they're basing that on Farsi, which then goes, anyway, so yeah.
Well, I'm not an expert in Akkadian historical phonology, so I won't say what all is available for there. There'd be better people to ask than me for that. But I can say we do have, just like the same methods I mentioned for Greek and Hebrew, we do have scribal interchanges over time, because Akkadian's kind of one of those things people forget is attested, with an enormous amount of material in the ancient period. Like,
millions of documents, most of which haven't even been translated.
Yeah, just sitting tablets in museums and places and all that. So there's a lot of material to see scribal interchanges and scribal changes over time. And then when we get late enough, this is something I worked a bit on, is we do have Greek transcription of Akkadian, but this is much later, right? So it can kind of be, a bit more difficult.
Like how later?
So like around the turn of the Common Era. So like maybe Hellenistic period kind of time.
First century BC, first century CE.
Yeah, around there, give or take 2 or 3 centuries in either direction.
Yeah.
So it's a so we do have things there.
Right.
And we do know that there do come to be certain interchanges over time, particular with the sign for wa and the sign for m. And so
we have an example like that in biblical Hebrew versus Aramaic, or even later Hebrew. We have al-gaman, and in Aramaic that's al-gawan or van. You tell me, is it argavan or argaman? Argawan.
Depends on the period, right? So this was okay. So we got on the cognate.
That's a color, right? So
What
color that is exactly? I'm slightly colorblind, so don't crimson, something like that. Yeah.
But all that was just to give the background to say that for those working on historical phonology in each of their languages, Akkadian, Arabic, all of that, it makes the most sense because all those languages have wa. That Proto-Semitic certainly had a wa, and so we would expect if at some point, Hebrew does have a v, which we know obviously it does because there's plenty of pronunciation traditions that have that. Then at some point, between Proto-Semitic and Hebrew, wa changed to va. I mean, that is pretty well established. The question is when exactly that happened is a more difficult thing, right? Somebody could argue it happened, earlier or later. But so that cognate evidence is kind of the basic thing. Then the other side would be, the earliest transcription, like the earliest tradition we have of any biblical Hebrew reading tradition, like documented as a pronunciation, right? I'm not talking about the Hebrew text itself because that doesn't have vowels, right? So we can't use that as a continuous documentation. You can use where they write the vowel letters sometimes to say, okay, here's a word here or there. But in terms of continuous, the earliest thing we have is those Greek transcriptions that I worked on. There's nothing before that. That's a continuous transcription of a reading tradition giving you the vowels.
What do you mean by continuous? I'm not sure.
So, like you could say the Dead Sea Scrolls are a few centuries earlier, but with them, the information you're going to get about pronunciation is only going to be occasional, right? Because the consonantal text, if you just have Dalit Bet Resh, that's not going to tell you much about how it was pronounced.
So we just know. So it's like what we talked about before, is the shin th or is the shin sh? Well, we need another language or some kind of statement in maybe in Hebrew. That could happen as well, right? Like when Sadia Gaon makes the statement that all of the Hebrew letters have the same pronunciation except for these particular, and he doesn't mention Vav as one of those. It's clear Sadia pronounced it as wa. Doesn't mean all the Jews at that time did. Obviously, they didn't, as we'll get to. Unless he pronounced Arabic with a va. Right. So this is the mind, it's mind-boggling, right? You talked about the circle, right? That's based on my assumptions about Arabic, right? That's interesting. So, all right. So
that continuous question, meaning just that there'll be occasional spelling interchanges, but you can't just read word by word and see how it's pronounced.
I see what you're saying.
Whereas the Secunda, the Greek transcriptions of Hebrew, it is just continuous. Like if you found Genesis 1:1, you'd be able to read, Breshith, Bara, it continuously, and you wouldn't have to just look for spelling interchanges because every word is written out with Greek, with the vowels, the Greek consonants. So even if the information it's giving you isn't complete in terms of is the sigma representing this or that, because sigma can represent a number of letters, it's at least there, right? It's giving you something. And so that's the earliest record we have. And there, when they transcribe Vav, they do it in 2 different ways. One, at the beginning of a word, like when it's the conjunction Vav and, it's just Omicron Ypsilon, right? So that's in Greek at the time, contemporary Greek, just is the oo sound, right? So if you're using a vowel sound to represent a consonant, chances are it's probably going to be a semi-vowel like wa or ya, right? Because yud, ya is transcribed with just an e sound. And so wa, especially at the beginning of a word, oo or woo would be transcribed that way. If it was v, then you might make use of Greek veta, which had shifted from b to v, kind of using both lips, kind of like a Spanish v sound. And then we also see in the middle of words, now I wouldn't totally deny the possibility that the other method could also transcribe a v sound, right? So you have, the other method is after the vowels alpha or epsilon, which are like A or E, then you just get the ypsilon, right? Now, historically in Greek, that was an au or eu sound, but around this time, it came to be pronounced as av or ev. And so you could argue that after a vowel, like a or e, it was had shifted to v. However, it seems to be just a scribal convention because of those historical diphthongs, alpha, epsilon, epsilon, which are associated with these au, eu sounds, because that's how you get it when it transcribes Arabic or Akkadian too, when we have those diphthongs. And we know that shift to v didn't happen there.
So like, for example,
but there is one word where
Yeah.
It's the word gewato or gewatho for kind of his pride. And there, it's a different form than the biblical form, which would be, ge'evato or something, or ga'avato.
Ga'avato, yeah.
And there it has the e vowel instead. It's a long e with a eta. And so there, because you don't have the scribal convention, because eta, ypsilon wasn't the same kind of diphthong status as the other ones, which are short diphthongs typically, there you go back to the omicron ypsilon to transcribe the vav sound. So it comes out as gewatho, geuwatho. And so I think all that together suggests that in the Greek transcriptions of Hebrew from the Roman period, that tradition is pronouncing it as wa.
Okay. So your conclusion from the Secunda, and we'll take the letter Vav as an example, is that the Vav was pronounced wa in the 3rd century CE in let's say in Cesarea where Origen was working, right?
Yes. So in that tradition, the reason I said Origen doesn't deserve as much credit is related to the answer to this, because for many years people would always say Origen wrote the 2nd column, Origen did this, Origen did that, but he didn't know Hebrew well enough to do that. I think he got the 2nd column from the Jewish community of Caesarea, or he saw them doing that kind of transcription thing and say, hey, can you guys help me and expand this to the whole Bible? But I think that tradition originates, and the text, in some fashion or another, with the Jewish community of Caesarea. Yes, for that community, in the late Roman period, I think they had wa. However, that's not the only piece of evidence in ancient times. You also have, there's a few interchanges in the Dead Sea Scrolls between things like bet and vav, which I think might indicate, again, some of them are difficult because you could maybe analyze it different grammatically. Could it be a conjunction vav instead of the preposition bet or vice versa? But I think taken all together, I think there is enough evidence to show that in the kind of Hellenistic Roman period, there were already at least some communities, maybe some that had the pronunciation v. But I think when we have the continuous traditions like the Secunda, I think that shows a wa pronunciation.
So I'm going to quote here from your, I guess this is your PhD dissertation, which is an absolute, and people can download this online if I'm not mistaken, and it's freely available, and it's absolutely, I found it a riveting read. I don't know that everyone will, but I definitely had to look up a lot of terminology, a lot of linguistic terms that are used here. But you wrote a bilabial fricative, and in parentheses you wrote the Greek beta. So that would be pronounced v. Well, v. We'll get to that.
Yeah, like making a v sound, but with just your lips.
So there's actually 2 V's in English. Am I right about that? Meaning there's the V of the word valve, and then there's like the normal V of, have and, I don't know, vault, or maybe. But in any event, there's linguistically, there's a distinction. Let's dwell on that for a minute. What is the difference between, and here are the terms, the bilabial fricative, or really the voiced bilabial fricative, and the voiced labiodental fricative? So one's written with the Greek beta by linguists, right? Not in ancient times, but by in this international phonetic alphabet, and the other's written with a V. What's the difference between? Because to me, they both sound like v.
So the voiced bilabial fricative, right? In phonetic terminology, we use terms that talk about where you make a sound, right? So if you have a dental sound, it means, where your tongue is on your teeth, right? Like dental, right? Or labial, right? Like lips. So if you're making a sound with the labials, like a bilabial meaning 2 lips, stop would be like p or b, because you stop the air, b. Bilabial stop. Now, a fricative means you kind of continue to let the air go through with the 2 lips, so it becomes v. And then a labiodental means you're combining a lip and the teeth, like that, v, and then letting the sound go through.
And those are two different sounds.
They're two different sounds.
According to, not according to linguists. Linguists identify two different sounds there, whereas I think 99.99% of the audience, including me, will, if I heard two audio recordings of that, I'm not sure I could distinguish them.
Right, because in English, we don't have the v sound, whereas in Spanish, some of the Spanish v is pronounced as v.
So that's really interesting. So going back to Sadia Gaon, he makes the state. I believe it's Sadia Gaon. He makes a statement somewhere that that the Vav is produced by. No, it's not Sadia Gaon. It's some other grammarian roughly from that period, or I want to say it's like David Alfasi or somebody like this, and who makes the statement that the Vav sound is produced by pushing the lips together. And that's then cited by many people as saying, well, see, it was a w. But you're saying, no, there's a sound where the lips are pressed together, which is a v. Is that right?
Yeah.
I mean, not about David Alfasi, but in general, right?
Yeah, I mean, certainly. I mean, a sound by the two lips becoming very close, v, can definitely be a fricative sound as well as...
Meaning v as opposed to w.
Yeah.
Okay.
V. Yeah, I mean, they both involve both lips.
I think this also shows how easy it is, or how close the two sounds are together, which explains why, as I understand it, at least in a number of languages, there was a shift from w to v, and maybe vice versa, I don't know, because they're really similar sounds, right? I mean,
well, and it happens in Latin as well. I mean, in some contexts, it happens in Greek. I mean, you see this happening kind of multiple languages around the same time, because I mentioned earlier how there's certain diphthongs, right, where you have kind of two vowels together in Greek, like au or au, that eventually became auv and then av. So things like that can happen. And in Latin also, something which would have been like in ancient times, salvete, right, for like hello, eventually becomes salvete. And so you get these changes. And part of it might be because wa, it's called, in addition to its phonetic name as kind of a labiovelar approximant, it can also be just called a semivowel, right? Because it's kind of like in between a consonant and a vowel, which means it's less salient. And so sometimes in languages, depending on the contact situation they're in, something that's less salient.
What do you mean by less salient?
So less notable in a way. Like it's easy to miss, right? So if you have, imagine between two words, like if I say, something like pu or vu, right? Where you just have a u, or if it was an ancient, like
be fruitful multiple,
warvu, something like that. The w would be easier to miss than if I changed that sound to a v. It's easier to lose a w or a y in between vowels, things like that. Whereas a v sound is going to be more strong. And so sometimes, depending on the contact situation of languages, maybe that salience, that wanting a sound that's stronger can, or kind of an assimilation, not like people make a decision about language change, but that speakers can kind of assimilate one sound to another, and maybe the less salient goes to the more salient sometimes. So maybe that explains why it happens in multiple languages. I mean, I'm not an expert in kind of the cross-linguistic patterns for w becoming v, but it definitely happens in a number of
I think you probably are, compared to most linguists even.